Okay, so now that we've luted these down, you want to remember that every time you move a tooth or place a tooth, you want to lute it down just so it stays in position and let it cool. Especially when you get into more teeth, you want to make sure you let it cool because if you don't, then just closing the articulator can move the teeth. And I'm sure, as you're already aware, that things don't just move in one dimension. You end up having to change a lot of things. So first thing I do is I actually, once these are luted down, I mark the incisal edges of the laterals also with pencil, and then I make sure that these stay dark. So again, looking down this, making sure I can't see any threads, and following the inner land, I make sure that basically these teeth are the same. They're following basically the same curvature, and I'm looking for the same thing. I want to see barely any of the facial surface. I just want to basically look right straight down it, and I still want to be able to see that inner land. So once I get the approximate angulation I'm looking for, or basically arch curvature that I'm looking for, then I bring it down and I make sure that, number one, make sure that my centrals are still touching, that nothing's changed there. And another thing that we want to do is these things need to be about half a millimeter above the occlusal plane. It's not super critical if it's exactly half a millimeter. Just take it to where it's slightly above. We want it to be aesthetic. Aesthetic is the most important thing because these are right in the front. Being accurate to the millimeter is not as critical as... You definitely don't want that to happen. So that's a good thing. While I was moving it, the tooth popped off. One of the reasons is because the wax was completely dry. I really should have heated it up a little bit or given it some warmth, because it will, if it's totally dry, they'll just pop off. Or if it's totally cooled down, it'll just pop off. So for fine movements, I like to use the sharp end of the cleoid discoid. So basically the cleoid end, and if you just take the sharp point, you can basically move things where you want them. So I have these teeth about the height I want them. There's about half a millimeter between the plate and the incisal edge. The other thing you want to do is make sure that the incisal edge is parallel to this occlusal plane, so it's a nice even straight line. There's a nice even gap, even space, and then of course you can see these gaps in the wax that I want to lute down because I want these teeth to stay in place. And always lute both sides because the tooth is going to move and separate from the wax, and it'll basically make it weak if you don't re-lute it. And you can see how this tooth is not really supported enough. There's not enough wax on the lingual or the palatal side, so I'm going to add just a tiny bit of wax just to kind of reinforce that area, because we do want the teeth, once we get the teeth where we want them, we don't want them to move. So, and again, try to keep things as clean as possible. So there. So now I'm going to check and make sure that, since I did move them a little bit, I want to make sure that they haven't moved in the arch. Make sure they're still following that inner land area. And whenever you move them, you always check to make sure what you did before didn't move. So now these look pretty good. The next thing I want to do is, once I get them about where I think where I want them, is I'm going to check basically the flow of curvature on the facial edges of the teeth. So I'll take it and I'll look like this, and if you'll notice, you can see how the teeth have a nice flow, a nice rounded flow. And that's what they're supposed to look like. It should be a nice, just even transition all along here. You shouldn't have any step ups or step downs. It should just be nice and smooth. And these teeth should be in the correct position. Another thing that you want to check out is, just like the centrals, how I told you you want to make sure that the angulation is correct on the facial. So the centrals are kind of straight up and down on the distal, and they have a nice curvature toward the central. These two are just slightly tilted distally. This is about right. So see how it's not straight up and down? The key to getting this angulation is really just getting it parallel with the occlusal plane. But I'm just telling you that you want it to look for it. And that's another reason why you want to keep the facial surfaces of the teeth clean, is to make sure you get the right angulation of the teeth, especially when you get back into the posterior. So these are about the correct angulation because they are parallel to this occlusal plane. So now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to clean this up a little bit just to make life easier later, and we're going to move on to the canines.